Hello, everyone, and welcome to PAEA's August webinar. Tonight, Dr. Stacy Potter, PAEA's Advocacy Chair, will speak about finding hidden cash to support your arts program. Registered participants will receive a Google Form link via email in a day or two to fill out for their 1 hour of Act 48 credit. Before we begin the webinar, we are asking participants to mute their microphones and keep their video off. Those controls are located in the bottom left corner of the controls bar. We are also asking everyone to sign in on the chat roll. Please use the same name in which you registered for this event. The chat roll can be found along the bottom in the controls bar as well. Signing in will ensure that you receive the Act 48 link. Let's get this webinar rolling. Dr. Potter, take it away.
Okay. Whoop, what happened? There we go. All right, hello everybody. I am very excited to start this webinar. And I hope that you're just as excited. Woohoo! All right, welcome to this webinar on money. Thank you, and I commend you for taking the time from the end of your summer break to prepare yourself for the upcoming school year. My hope is that you will begin this school year educated and prepared to increase your funding streams for projects and purchases for your students, schools, and your art programs. All right, so let's start with an overview of this webinar. Today we're going to explore the arts budget process and discover hidden cash to support arts opportunities at your school and within your community. Our objectives are going to begin, it's going to be a little bit tough, but I'm here with you, so make sure you put your questions down. But today we're going to begin with exploring the budgeting process and determining funding streams. So we're going to find out, where does this money come from? Then we're going to look at alternative areas for financial support, conduct a review of the resources, and engage in an open forum for questions. So we're going to begin with the heavy lifting, but don't worry. Remember, I'm here with you. So if you have questions while we explore the budget process, please send them in and I will answer them as best as I can. All right, where does money come from? School funding is a blend of federal, state, and local dollars. Local funding largely comes from property taxes. Federal money, which actually only accounts for 10% of all education funding, usually targets low-income students or other distinct groups. State funding is where things get complicated. Woohoo! So let's talk about it. Each fiscal year, the state makes 6 payments to school districts, beginning with an August payment and continuing every other month until the last payment in June. The first 5 payments will constitute 15% of what the state owes, while the final June payment represents 25% of what is owed. So if we look at the screen, we have a bunch of weights, an actual weight and an adjusted student weight. So what the state does is they put this into account using a fair funding formula. So let's pretend that your total population is really just 1,000 students. And you have 850 students in the general population, but 50 of them have special needs and 100 of them are underserved and receive like free and reduced lunch or something like that. What the state actually does is they give the students with special circumstances a higher weight. So what they will actually say is your total population is not 1,000 students anymore. It could be like 1,200 students. The added weights for certain groups of students is a recognition of a higher cost to educate that group. The resulting weighted student count is then adjusted based on district factors, and they arrive at the weighted and adjusted student count. The chart on the right is an example of what I just spoke about. This formula does not allocate a specific dollar amount to each school, though. Instead, it determines what the district's share of the amount of funding available to be distributed from the state. A district share of funding under this formula is simply its share of the statewide weighted and adjusted student count. Whew, I'll give you a second to just process that. But don't worry, I know we're visual people, so here's a visual for it. This might be a little bit easier to understand. The state requires districts to assess a percentage of the property tax and has estimated each district's ability to pay based on this amount. The tax rate is indicated by the dots, and each district's per student contribution is represented by a blue bar. So as you can see, the amount each district raises through a 1% tax really varies, with one raising more than $10,000 per student. Less property wealthy districts, however, need significant help from the state to reach this minimum. What the state does is it fills the gap between what the district is expected to provide and the predetermined minimum. That is shown here in the dark blue bar. In some cases, districts may not even get any funding from the state because they can meet or exceed the spending minimum on their own. And as you would expect, districts that raise less from local resources get more state funding. So of course, property taxes are not always the same across districts. So this is a slide that discusses the Property Tax Relief Fund. And on the right is a timeline to inform the schools of their share of the state money. So if a low-income school does not collect much property tax, the state ends up paying more. A school in a higher property tax location may only receive a little or no state funding. And unfortunately, visual arts programs are still required to advocate for a piece of this pie. The well-rounded education statement from PAEA, which is the Every Student Succeeds Act, really helps us. One of the biggest areas that I have found as part of my dissertation work was that the community supporting the arts program actually plays a major role in how much funding schools will provide the arts programs. I found that the more that the community values the arts, the more funding administrators provide to these programs. We will talk about this as we move through the remainder of this presentation. Okay, so now we're happy because with all that property tax stuff completed and worked out and schools are notified, then the state gives the money to the Department of Education, and then the Department of Education gives half of that money to the school district on August 22nd, and the other half of the money to them on October 24th. So everybody's happy. The money starts coming. So now we're going to look at alternative areas for financial support. Federal funding is the first place that we can request funding opportunities. Presenting your needs within the framework of federal title funding demonstrates that you are not only aware of the opportunities that are out there, but promotes educational leaders to add the arts into their mindset when requesting federal funding. Accessing federal funding brings creativity to the table. Approaching funding requests with this knowledge will show that you are not only smart and innovative, but a big thinker. It is important to note that the goal of federal funding is to supplement, not supplant, state and local funds. The funds provided offer equity for programs across neighborhoods if accessed correctly. Some schools may not realize the potential of the federal funding provided and underfund many of their programs inadvertently. This actually just happened throughout Bucks County when I took a recent poll of the school districts accessing title funds. Here's a list of the federal programs that may be accessed to support your programs. We will look at each a bit closer, but this gives you a general idea of what types of support they can fund. Broadly speaking, federal education dollars are provided to districts through grants and programs. Many of these federal funds are earmarked for specific groups of students, including students from low-income families, English language learners, and students with disabilities. ESSA, which is the Every Student Succeeds Act, has reinforced the arts as a core academic area and promotes educational leadership to fund arts programs. This language of a well-rounded education is the cornerstone of funding opportunities using federal programs. Not only does it pave the way for our need of funding for our programs, but also encourages art-specific professional development opportunities. Oops, forgot my happy dance. And there's no sound for some reason. All right, well, he's doing a happy dance. There's no sound, but we're happy. Now we have a way to get some money. In particular, a district may include a description of arts education programming, its contribution to ensuring a student receives a well-rounded education, and how it will support success for all of the students. So here are opportunities for the arts. As was the case under the No Child Left Behind Act, ESSA also states that the arts may be included in plans for school-wide programs. The appropriate programs will vary based on the needs assessment conducted for a school, but may include arts courses that expand the curriculum or co-curricular arts programs that engage students in the school and can strengthen school climate and culture. A current trend right now is project-based learning. Let your administrators know that we as artists are specifically trained and certified in this style of teaching and instructional delivery. At my school, the art teachers were the coaches for this program and acted as soundboards for the teachers' ideas. Districts may use Title II funds to establish professional learning opportunities for arts educators. In addition, because ESSA includes helping students succeed in a well-rounded education as a goal of professional development, districts can develop programs using art-based techniques or arts-integrated strategies to build the capacity for teachers. Every year, I consistently request these funds. This should be definitely on your to-do list. They work in my favor to deliver art-specific professional development opportunities. These include conference attendance, countywide events, professional learning community meetings within our district, access to professional organizations such as PAEA, and I am sure that the list could go on as your creativity sees fit. The important thing to remember when requesting this money is planning, and we will get to that shortly. All right, Title IV. Let's break this down. If we read through the definition, it says well-rounded educational opportunities. This can include opportunities for art courses, programs that integrate the arts into other subject areas such as STEAM, and programs that focus on addressing student engagement and culture. If we look at number 2, safe and healthy students. In addition, the arts can be included in strategies to help ensure that schools keep students safe and healthy. For example, the U.S. Department of Education's ESSA Title IV Part A guidance, Student Support and Academic Enrichment Program, identified trauma recovery programs that use the arts as a therapeutic measure as a potential activity. PAEA hosts a variety of resources regarding trauma-informed education and the arts. This can be found on our advocacy page under Educate. The third one says effective use of technology. This can include the purchase of technology for arts classrooms or professional development for arts educators to incorporate new technology in the classroom or implement blended learning strategies. Not only does the definition of a well-rounded education include the arts, but ESSA specifically identifies the arts and music as eligible activities for 21st century community learning centers to undertake in order to enrich the educational opportunities for our students, particularly those from low-income families. This means that districts, community organizations, and other eligible organizations can include arts education programming as part of their applications to the state's 21st Century Community Learning Centers grant program. Whoa, that was a mouthful. So it's important to plan ahead if you are interested in sustainable funding streams that reoccur annually, and those are your title funds. So if we look at this calendar, I had written a couple notes that early October, if you want to access title funding, that's when you should start to do your planning. Because by the time November rolls around, you should be prepared to present your school leadership with a packet or some idea with also documentation attached to it with data-driven information. On January 31st, the school district must submit their preliminary budget for public inspection and comment. So a lot of school districts want those proposals in early fall so that they have time to put together their preliminary budget documentation. 10 days later, after January 31st, on the 10th of February, the district needs to submit an intent to adopt the budget to the public. And then another 10 days after that, on February 20th, they submit the intention to adopt the budget to the Pennsylvania Department of Education. On July 15th, the deadline to submit the adopted budget to PDE for the school year is required. If you're interested in learning more about the role of property taxes on your district's budget process or any other state funding issues, you can find the full timeline on our website under Advocacy-Educate. Okay. Woo! Let's give our brain a little bit of a break. So now comes the fun part. This is what we are best at, innovative funding. Grants, fundraisers, and local ideas. So we're going to start talking about some grant options. Resources for grants are located at the end of this presentation in the resource section, and many arts organizations offer grants. One of the benefits about writing a grant is that it usually has a higher payout than any other type of funding that you can have. Some tips you want to think about that don't usually come up is calling the grant funder. Like, call the actual organization, get your name in their brain, ask them lots of questions, and then when they see your grant application cross their desk, they'll be like, hey, I talked to that person. Let me take a closer look at this and see if they actually did some of the things that I recommended. Other buzzwords that are really popular right now, inclusion, accessibility, diversity, underserved, making sure the whole school is being affected or impacted, and multiple levels of involvement. So that would be cross-district, so elementary and middle school, or maybe all levels. And if you have multiple writers on the grant, it demonstrates a full department commitment. All right, I'm sure that many of you already do this, but let's talk about fundraisers briefly. So some of the benefits of fundraising is that you would receive the money during the same school year that you are completing the fundraiser. From experience, this usually works great for elementary levels, but then as you move higher up in the grade level, I have found that involvement reduces greatly. So I just wanted to take a second to talk about where to store the money. This is something that is often an oversight or an afterthought. So I thought it was really important to talk about. At the elementary level, you have a benefit of having a PTO. So the PTO can open an art account or art folder within their funding, and they can hold your money for you. And there are some benefits to this I'll talk about in a second. But once you get to the higher levels, you don't really have a PTO holding balances for you. So one recommendation I have is to open an art club booster account. To do an art club and have a booster account with it, you usually need a student representative as part of the oversight team of the art club. So usually I would choose somebody that is very responsible, and they just are kind of like, you know, put into a little bit of a leadership position, and they really end up loving it. The benefit of this is that you are in control of your money. So schools and principals provide budgets to the art departments, but they have to be spent prior to the end of the fiscal year, which is June 30th. My school actually freezes all spending as of April 1st. And I think this is because it provides the finance department time to create those state reports that we mentioned earlier prior to the end of June. If you had a PTO or a booster account, the money doesn't need to be spent. The balances can carry over from year to year. So that is one of the benefits of doing it that way. But as always, I would definitely check with your school district or school leadership before, just to make sure that everything is hunky-dory. All right. So local ideas are fundraisers completed in-house by you with few school partners. And really the sky is the limit here. So I know that this is trendy right now, but why not cash in on the fun? Paint nights. They really don't need to be limited to painting too. So I know a lot of people that get stressed out because it's difficult to paint, and some parents might be reluctant to want to join in on this. So if you're interested in a little bit of more of behind the scenes work, clay might even be a right fit for you. Everybody loves it. It's very forgiving. And you could do something as simple as like a slump bowl. You could have participants roll out a little chunk of clay, design it with underglazes, and then slump it into a disposable dish. Those would dry, you fire them, pour them into a bucket of clear glazed dip, fire them again, and return them to the students, and everybody would end up loving it. Other ideas could be printmaking night, garden sculptures in the spring with found materials or clay or metal. Theme nights could be fun. You could have a Hawaiian night where everybody has to dress up and you make something with flowers. There are just really so many options to these paint nights. And one of the wonderful things is that you are having the community come in and celebrate the art program with their students or their children. Another big trend right now are diversity projects. There are a lot of pros. There are a couple of bit of cons, but mostly it's pros. Students basically would pay like $1 to $5 to purchase a rock or any item that can be placed around the exterior of the school. Each student designs and paints the rock with something about themselves. Placements of the rocks could be in gardens, used as landscape borders, or to create dry streams. And it doesn't really have to just be rocks, but they are very low cost and easy to store and display. If you'd like to find out more about equity, diversity, and inclusion, please check out our advocacy tab on the PAEA website. We are going to be putting more and more resources on there for you to access throughout the year. So this is a fun one. I just did this for the first time this past year, and it was a big hit. It's an art smock design contest. So at the end of the year, I had students enter a contest to design next year's art smocks. And then the winner is voted on by the students. And then their design is available for people to order for smocks for next year. One of the things I found is that if you ask the students to link their image with something that's a current cultural trend, and then also bring into the importance of art or pop culture images that have an art message, you'll end up selling more shirts. So those are some things to think about while you're doing a contest like this. These local ideas are not going to provide you with an exorbitant amount of funds, but they will provide materials for your program or fund small programs to promote community involvement and bring attention to your art program. This in turn, as I said before, will build parental support and encourage principal support for your programs, which can lead to increased funding. Okay, we're taking a side note. The next few slides are not targeted to funding, but I think that this information is so important for all art educators to know. Art is and always was considered a core subject in ESSA and in No Child Left Behind. The art scan conducted by the Arts Education Partnership does a wonderful job looking at state policy to address concerns. The requirement is the same for every level of education. If you read this carefully, it does state that standards-based art education must be taught, but does not state that the instruction is required to be a separate class. Therefore, the art room is not a requirement, but who teaches art is, as you will see in a second. This slide tells you about the assessments. This policy states that art education must be a rigorous course that includes assessments. These assessments are able to be determined by the school entity. Usually the art teachers have a voice in determining the assessment procedures, which indicates process and product review. All right, so now here is the part that tells you exactly what you need to know for licensing requirements for art teachers and non-art teachers. This is very important to understand because I often hear colleagues say that they are worried that classroom teachers can replace them for the art curriculum, especially at the elementary level, and that we are just a prep period. This is not true. I just want to take a moment to clarify and prepare you with some reassurance. This information can be provided to your administration if this concern ever arises. And I am also available at any time if you need a letter of support for school boards or administration. This piece of policy defines the previous policy statements of who provides the art curriculum in Pennsylvania. So the bottom highlighted part states that no teacher shall teach in any public school what they have not been certified to teach. And therefore, art educators teach art education. Hooray! So now I would like to take some time to address your questions and open the floor for comments. Does anyone have any successful funding stories they'd like to share with the group, or any questions that you would like me to answer?
As you have questions, please feel free to use the chat roll to send your questions to Dr. Potter.
So I had a question here that says, is there always a reserve from the property tax relief fund? So that is the part that tells you whether the states are going to give the schools money. So historically, yes, but it does fluctuate with the economy. So in 2019, a bill was put together to address this a little bit. It's a bipartisan bill, essentially recommending that school districts no longer collect income from property taxes. To ensure districts still receive the funds they need, they want to have this bill state that the funding would be retrieved from a personal income tax increase of 1.8%. So right now our personal income tax is typically 3.07 and it would be 4.87. So they are stating that this is considered one of the more stable taxes levied in our state, and it'll ensure that districts will have the funding for their schools and not rely on property taxes to help with the inequity that still exists. Any other questions?
Looks like a few popped up on the chat roll.
Okay, I don't know how to find that.
Okay, if you go down to the bottom, that little chat bubble in your bar, then click on that, it'll open your chat roll.
We don't see a little bubble.
Down in that bottom black bar, the controls bar, when you roll your mouse down to the bottom.
Okay, maybe I have to stop sharing for a minute to see that, because I don't have it. Okay,
Okay.
Here we go. Now I can see it.
There you go. So,
All righty. Okay, so I see a question. How do you know that the district is using some of the money set aside for art and not for other subjects listed in your slide? That is an awesome question. So the best way to find that out is to just straight up say to them in the fall, hey, I need this much money. How much money do we have set aside for the art program? And most likely they'll tell you, you have this X amount, and the best thing you can do to answer that, the next thing you say, when do I have to spend it by? Because if you don't spend it by a certain predetermined date, they will take your money and put it towards other programs. So that's an excellent question. I find Artsonia to be a terrific way. Yes, Artsonia is wonderful. That is very good. And they do not have a deadline. Thank you, Leslie, for sharing that. Any other questions? Title IV funds for National Art Honor Society chapters, since they are a specific group and they're not really benefiting the entire school community, I'm not sure if that would qualify for that, but it's worth asking about. So the question was, can you use Title IV funding for National Art Society chapters? But I would check that out, because technically, you know, a loose roundabout way, yes, they might qualify for that, but I'm not quite certain about that. And so actually, parents and the entire community has access to all of the school budget reports. They're usually listed on the school website. You can also find them under the school board tabs usually, and they have to actually have presentations for the public. So these presentations that they prepare, they usually put them up there, and they'll show line items of what the schools are actually spending towards different programs. Great question. Okay, I don't see any more questions, so I'm going to go back to my next slide.
Wait a minute, I have one. I'm chatting it in. Hold on.
Oh, okay. Oh. Ah! Come on. Oh, where my little bar went.
Did it come up?
yes.
Do you mind just saying it to me? I can't find the bar went away. I can't click
Okay.
on it.
So the same parent was saying that they were looking into it, and I was trying to tell them different things, and they said, well, what if the line item that they're listing is for the overall of the whole district rather than the one building? She was concerned that the elementary school where her child went, they were not, the art seemed to be lacking, and other things seemed to have more funding, and I was trying to help her.
Right. So that's actually excellent, because sometimes the individual buildings they actually will have a principal line item for his general budget. So the only way to find out exactly what the principal is then saying, I'm dividing it this way, I'm dividing it that way. The only way to find that out is to actually just send a message to the principal and say, I'm interested in this. Can you let me know some more about your program and how are the arts funded? Typically in a school district, there is a per pupil predetermined amount. So if you don't get anywhere with the principal, you can also go to curriculum and instruction and ask them, and they can let you know. But I agree, when it's individual buildings, it does come down to principal discretion, which is why bringing the community into your programs as much as possible puts that pressure on the administrators to make sure that they fund your programs properly. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, okay, great. And are there any more questions? Nope. Okay. All right, so we're going to start the resource section. I will go through these slides very slow, but a lot of them have links. So after the presentation, you can always access this webinar, and you can click on the links if you want to find out more information. Gone are my blues and gone are my tears. I've got the you to show your tears. The long lost hour has come back to the home. This silver you can't turn your view low. We're in funny.
And then you'll need to share your screen again.
Oh, it's not sharing?
Nope.
Oh my goodness. What is going on with this Zoom meeting? Here we go. There we go. Okay. Gone are my blues and gone are my tears. I've got the you to show your tears. The long lost hour has come back to the home. This silver you can't turn your view low. We're in money, we're in money. We've got a lot of funny ways to get along. We're in money, the sky is sunny. All that depression you are through, you don't have wrong. We can keep at night, my friend, not you know. And when you let Lord, we look at our money. Oh, we're in money, come on, honey. Let's make it spend it, take it round and around. Okay, that was it. I hope that you enjoyed the presentation.
Wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And when we send out some of our next newsletters, we'll make sure we include Dr. Potter's email address in there for you, so you can definitely contact her with any questions. And of course, you can always find her at the conference. She is always very visible and always willing to talk to everybody. So we just have a few quick things to go over here before we say goodnight. So again, we want to thank Dr. Potter for all that wonderful information. It was fantastic, and we really hope you enjoyed your time with us tonight. And two more quick things before we go. We do always make sure that we share the registration link for our next WebinART. So our next one will be held in September. Join Benjamin Hoffman, PAEA's Region 10 representative, to explore the benefits of using sketchbooks with your students. And I'm going to go ahead and add the link for that right in the chat roll. So that is there now. So please feel free to copy that link if you want to check that out. And of course, that link will also be available on the PAEA website calendar, the PAEA Facebook pages, and most likely through email from your division or region reps. And second, please make sure that you have signed in on the chat roll to verify your participation in tonight's webinar. And remember to check your email for the Act 48 link coming in the next day or two. So unless anybody else has any more questions for Dr. Potter, then that's a wrap.